Imagine being falsely accused of something you didn't do. Your job, your reputation, and maybe even your life being thrown into the abyss of lies. That's what happened to Jason Miller. Everything seemed lost when his boss, Kyle Bennett, fabricated an accusation that would have put him out of business without a second thought. But Jason didn't let it get him down. In an unexpected twist, he had something that no one could deny. The truth, captured on a hidden camera. What Jason did next changed everything. He not only fought for his dignity, but for justice in a system where mistakes are often hidden by the powerful. And best of all, he proved that the truth, no matter how distant it may seem, always finds its way. If you've ever been through something similar, or are simply looking for a story of overcoming, I invite you to stay with me until the end. Here, we'll discover how courage and faith can lead us to a new beginning, even when everything seems lost. And before you continue, subscribe to the channel, because stories like this, which touch our hearts and inspire us to be better, are what we have most precious here. Jason Miller has always prided himself on being an honest person, but the work environment at the technology company where he had been for 5 years was starting to become unbearable. Kyle Bennett, the manager, was never a big fan of him. Maybe it was because of Jason's dedication to his work, or maybe because of his ability to stand out amidst the mediocrity that dominated the office. It was an ordinary morning when Jason received the news that would change his life forever. Kyle called him to his desk, and without ceremony, accused him of stealing information from the company. "You've been caught red-handed, Jason. I'm not going to let this go," Kyle said, with a cold expression. Jason felt a deep shock, as if the ground had been ripped out from under his feet. He knew he had done nothing wrong. Suddenly everything he had built seemed to crumble. The reputation he had worked so hard to cultivate was now threatened by a lie. But Jason was not the type to be easily shaken. Something inside him told him that the truth had to come out. And it was there, in that moment of utter desperation, that he made a decision. If he had to fight for his integrity, he had to do it intelligently. With the weight of the accusation on his shoulders, Jason left Kyle's office, his heart beating fast, but his mind already beginning to formulate a plan. He knew that if he fought this fight with words alone, no one would believe him. Kyle was a man with power, and the company would probably side with him, or at least that was what he imagined. But Jason had an advantage that no one else knew about: his hidden camera. It was a habit he had developed over the past few months, always suspicious that something strange was going on behind the scenes. He never thought it would come in handy in such an urgent way, but now he knew he had irrefutable proof in his hands. He rummaged through his backpack and with a sigh pulled out the small but powerful device. This hidden camera would be the key to his defense, but he needed to use it very carefully. The first person he looked for was Leo Walker, his friend and co-worker. Leo was the only one who knew about the device, and more importantly, he had always believed in his honesty. "I don't know what I'm going to do with this, Leo, but I need you to help me get these images to someone who can actually help," Jason said, his voice thick with concern, but also with newfound determination. Leo looked at him, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll do this, Jason. If what you have in there really shows the truth, then justice will be served. But you have to be careful. We can't let them find out before we have everything ready." Jason felt a faint hope rise in his chest. Maybe there was still a chance. And now, more than ever, he knew that the battle was just beginning. With the recording in hand, Jason and Leo began working discreetly to transform the evidence into something that could be used against Kyle. They knew that in order for justice to be served, the right person would need to see the truth. Diana Torres, the company's CEO. She was the only one who could see the situation impartially and make the necessary decisions. The challenge was to get to her without arousing suspicion. Diana was known for being a strong and fair leader, but she was also very busy. After a few weeks of trial and error, Jason finally got a meeting with her. He knew that if he had the chance to show her the footage, Diana would understand the gravity of the situation. The meeting room was spacious, with large windows that offered a stunning view of the city. Diana, a middle-aged woman with a look that mixed authority and empathy, greeted Jason with a friendly smile, but she was not completely convinced by his story. "Jason, do you have something to tell me?" she asked, her voice calm but with a hint of caution. Jason took a deep breath, trying to control the anxiety that was consuming him. He knew he couldn't rush, that he needed to be precise. "I know you have a good heart, Diana, and that you've always fought for justice within the company. But what I'm going to show you will change everything you think about what happened in my case." He then, with trembling hands, handed over the flash drive with the recording and explained it briefly. Diana hesitated for a moment, but the expression on her face changed when she started watching the content. The video showed Kyle forging evidence to incriminate Jason, something Jason could never have imagined. He wasn't just a victim of a false accusation. He was part of a much bigger game, where the truth never had a chance to be heard. Diana paused the video, her eyes fixed on the screen. She seemed shocked, but at the same time, a firm decision was forming in her mind. "I never imagined something like this could happen under my command," she said, her voice a little choked. The silence that followed was heavy, but Jason knew that the truth was now on his side. He had hoped that with this revelation, the weight of the accusation would finally fall away. When Jason received confirmation that Diana would confront Kyle, a whirlwind of emotions took over him. He knew that the moment of truth was coming, and there was no turning back. Now all he needed was for the manager to be held accountable for his actions. The feeling of justice was starting to ignite inside Jason, but at the same time, he felt a growing apprehension. On the morning of the confrontation, Jason was called to an urgent meeting in Diana's office. When he arrived, he found not only the CEO, but also Kyle Bennett. The atmosphere was tense, and words were not necessary to convey that something big was about to happen. Diana sat down across from them and, with a serious look on her face, began to speak. "Kyle, I have received very serious information about what happened to Jason. The footage he showed me is clear. You are being accused of falsifying evidence and trying to unfairly destroy an employee's career." Diana's voice was calm, but charged with authority. Kyle, visibly nervous, tried to stand his ground. "This is a mistake, Diana. Jason, he was never a good asset to the team. He always caused problems but he couldn't finish his sentence because Diana raised her hand to interrupt him. Do you mean to tell me you were trying to protect the company? Or that you were just dealing with a problem? Don't make me laugh, Kyle. This is a question of ethics and responsibility, and you failed at both." The CEO looked deeply into Kyle's eyes, as if he were a small child who had failed to hide his mischief. Jason, for his part, felt a mixture of anger and relief. He knew he couldn't let Kyle get away with this. His professional life was at stake, and more importantly, his dignity. "I've always done my best here, Kyle, and I've always been proud to be part of this company. But by trying to destroy me, you've only proven how weak and insecure you are. I hope you have the courage to look inside yourself and understand what you've done." Kyle, now visibly defeated, stammered incoherent words, but his defense no longer made sense. The damage had been done, and he knew the evidence could not be denied. Diana stood up, looking at Jason with a look that mixed respect and regret. "You're free, Jason, and I guarantee that Kyle will face the consequences of his actions." Jason felt immense relief, but also sadness for everything he had to go through. The journey had not been easy, but he now knew that sometimes the truth needs patience and courage to be revealed. After the confrontation, the impact of everything that had happened began to spread throughout the company. Kyle Bennett, who had previously been a respected manager, saw his position crumble. The weight of lies and betrayal followed him wherever he went, and his credibility was irreparably damaged. Diana, the CEO, made a firm decision. Kyle would be fired and his name removed from any important projects at the company. Jason's words, along with the images, showed that there was no place for someone like him in charge. As Kyle dealt with the consequences of his actions, Jason felt a mixed sense of victory and reflection. He had fought for his honor and managed to prove his innocence, but something inside him made him question the true motives behind Kyle's actions. This wasn't just an abusive manager or a simple attempt. Jason knew that, as much as he had won his freedom, he couldn't help but feel sorry for the man who had betrayed him. He no longer saw Kyle as an enemy, but as someone lost in his own flaws. The truth is that we all, in one way or another, carry our weaknesses, and the way we deal with them can change the course of our lives forever. In the days that followed, the company began to recover from the impact of this situation. Trust was restored, and the work environment gradually became healthier. Jason, however, did not feel completely healed. He knew that what he had gone through had shaped him irrevocably. He had learned painful lessons, but he had also become stronger. It's not about what others do to you, but what you do to yourself in the face of it, Jason thought, as he sat at his desk, watching the routine return to normal. He felt an urgent need to share this experience, for his story to be a reminder to everyone. The truth always finds a way, but it is our response to it that defines us. Over time, Jason gradually regained his place in the company. He was no longer the employee who had spent months being watched with suspicion, but someone who, despite adversity, had managed to prove his worth. However, the true victory was not only in the professional recognition, but in the internal transformation he had experienced. For weeks, he had reflected on what had happened, on the pain of betrayal, and, at the same time, on the strength he had found within himself to move forward. But there was something that consumed him. The need to understand why Kyle had acted that way. What had driven him to become a person willing to destroy someone to preserve his own position? Jason knew that true healing would come only when he understood this, not to justify, but to forgive. It was then that he made the decision to seek Kyle, not with anger, not with revenge, but with a sincere desire to seek answers. Deep down, Jason knew that he could not carry the weight of this hurt in his heart. Liberation came with forgiveness, not only of Kyle, but also of himself, for allowing the fear and insecurity of another to affect him in such a way. The meeting took place in a small, discreet cafe. Kyle, with his shoulders slumped and his eyes sad, seemed like a shadow of his former self. Jason, on the other hand, entered the space with an air of serenity, determined not to revive the anger that still burned in his chest. "Jason, I don't know what you expect from me, but I can't change what I did," Kyle said, almost like a painful confession. "I was afraid of losing my place. I was trying to control everything, and I ended up destroying my own life and yours." Jason looked at him for a moment, trying to process those words. He knew that deep down, what Kyle really wanted was to be forgiven, but the question that echoed in his mind was, so why didn't he ask for forgiveness before? Why did he choose to attack? "I can't change what happened, Kyle. But I can move on, and I want to tell you something. What you did won't define me. You won't carry that guilt forever unless you keep wallowing in it. Forgiveness isn't about you. It's about me. I need to move on, and so do you." Kyle hung his head, absorbing the words with a mixture of shame and gratitude. It was far from a grand moment of reconciliation, but something in the air felt like it had snapped. Jason knew that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but letting go of the weight that had consumed him for so long. After the confrontation and forgiveness, Jason felt that his journey was finally reaching a point of peace. But at the same time, he knew that the hardest part was yet to come, the need to rebuild his self-confidence. The impact of being falsely accused and the pain of betrayal had left deep scars, but he now had the power to start his story over. Little by little, he was rediscovering the pleasure in the work he once loved, but which had for so long become a source of anxiety and fear. The environment at the company, with Kyle gone, had become healthier, more collaborative. Jason felt that his strength no longer came only from what he could prove to others, but from what he now knew about himself. He was resilient. He was able to get back up no matter how hard the fall was. He also realized something much deeper. The transformation he was experiencing was not only professional, but personal. Jason had learned that in order to move forward, he needed to trust people again. Forgiving Kyle and himself was just the beginning of a healing process. He felt that after each hardship, he was closer to the best version of himself. It was as if a fog had lifted. Before, he had carried an invisible weight, a constant feeling that something still needed to be resolved. But now, he felt his heart was lighter, as if he were taking another step toward a better, more peaceful future. He had found strength he didn't even know he had. And now, more than ever, he understood the importance of following his own path, with purpose and faith in what the future could bring. Ultimately, Jason decided that he would no longer be content to be a mere spectator in his own life. He wanted to take control of his destiny, to use his story of overcoming obstacles to inspire others, to show that despite the challenges, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. He began to get involved in projects outside of work, helping others get back on their feet after adversity. He knew that his true mission was to take his message of resilience and resilience beyond the confines of the company. Jason was ready to write the next chapter of his life, not as a survivor, but as a victor. Over time, Jason realized that his victory was not just about what had happened in the office, but about the transformation that had occurred in his soul. He had faced great adversity, a profound blow that could have destroyed him. But instead, he had risen again, stronger and more aware of his ability to overcome. The true victory for Jason was in the learning that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. He understood that life is not always fair, that people who should act with integrity can fail. But he also learned that the key to true freedom lies in forgiveness, not to absolve another person of their mistakes, but to free himself from the weight of hurt. By forgiving Kyle, Jason freed his heart to move forward without the chains of anger and bitterness. And more than that, he began to realize that his story had a greater purpose. Every step, every moment of suffering, and every achievement were essential parts of a greater plan, a plan that Jason now knew could help inspire and guide others. He began to share his experience with colleagues and friends, helping them find strength in adversity, to trust themselves and others again, and to realize that no matter how dark a phase may be, the light always finds a way. Jason knew that life's journey would be full of challenges, but now he was not afraid of the future. He believed in his ability to face whatever came, with the same resilience that helped him overcome that difficult chapter in his story. He knew that each day was a new opportunity to grow, to learn, and above all to live with purpose. And as he looked to the horizon with renewed confidence, Jason smiled. He was no longer just the man who had been betrayed. He was the man who had overcome, who had forgiven, and who had finally found his true purpose. Jason showed that even in the most desperate situations, it is possible to find a way back. He not only proved his innocence, but he also discovered the power of resilience and forgiveness.
His story is a powerful reminder that when we feel overwhelmed by adversity, it is our response to it that determines who we are. The question now is, have you ever experienced something like this? How would you deal with a situation of betrayal?
The truth always comes out, but are we prepared to face it and come out stronger? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like it, and share it with someone who needs a message of hope and transformation. Together, we can spread the strength of overcoming and forgiveness. Until next time.